What's up, you YouTubers out there? It's what am I going by nowadays? You know who I am. So I'm a Chicana, a frontera. My people hail from Hidalgo County since before the border crossed us, and I have a lot to say about this one guy who's talking about Juneteenth didn't have enough Mexican inclusion, la la la. So I fancy myself a bit of a historian. So let's talk about Juneteenth. Okay. So the Emancipation Proclamation is passed and the information is stifled. And it's not even though the information reaches Texas, the slave population is what's called is a learned or a forced helplessness. They were not allowed to be literate, and so even though this information hit Texas, the puto cabrons didn't allow it to reach the slave population, so they could keep their slaves in Texas. Okay. So then the news hits Texas, and that's when everybody is really considered free, because we're not free until we're all free, really. So that's when it hits, and that's what Juneteenth is about. How is this relevant to Mexicans? And is it? Well, for one, to cry about, like, why wasn't this Kendrick Lamar thing? Why didn't it have Mexican inclusion? I thought maybe this guy was talking about the history, and maybe you could look at it in that context, but no, he was just like, this was a West Coast thing. Really, Juneteenth has nothing to do with the West Coast. It has to do with Texas. And some of it had to do with the West Coast, yeah, but how much of Mexico is on the West Coast, and how much is connected to Texas, cabrón? Right? So it's mostly about Texas. And if this was supposed to be a West Coast thing because of somebody's birthday or whatever, I couldn't even find your name, but whatever, la la la. But really, you can't let them have one day, bro? That bothers you so much? And then when you make a point about Mexican inclusion, it's not even historically accurate or informed. Yes, there is a Mexican chapter to that story, but we are not the stars of it. And we deserve nothing for doing the decent thing. So here's the truth. You know, I've come across a lot of people, and a lot of people like to say, you know, the original cowboys were really indigenous or natives, right? The Apaches, the Comanches. Yes, that's true. The original cowboys were also Mexicans because Spaniards came over with the horses, and they rode off on the women. No, they came over with the horses. And we created a whole culture, and that's what my Tejano culture is about. Okay, we were ranchers first. And you will also come across people that say, you know, the original cowboys were actually African, freed African slaves, or today we know them in the diaspora in America to be black. The original cowboys were actually black. Which is true. They are all true. How can this be so? To be Mexican is to be an integration of peoples. So, for one, there was a time in New Spain, you see, Cortés made first contact with the Mexica, or what the colonizer calls the Aztecs, at Tenochtitlan, which was based on a hydro-agricultural system, which meant that their entire city was basically built on a swamp with like these agricultural beds that had been raised up from the ground of the water. And Cortés makes first contact and doesn't appreciate all this the way colonizers don't. And one of the first things he did when he gained power in the region was put New Spain on top of Tenochtitlan, and in the process he squashed all the hydroelectronics, the hydro agricultural system was known as the Chinampa system, Chinmpa, Chinampa. He put New Spain on top of Tenochtitlan. And then New Spain became Mexico City. And because Mexico City is on top of the old ruins of this swampland culture, that's why Mexico City today has water problems. That's why Mexico City is sinking. That's why Mexico City's water is a big issue. So there was a time in New Spain where there were more people from the African diaspora at that time in New Spain than there were Spaniards. Remember, at this time they would have been called the Peninsularos because they would have been from the peninsula. This is mestizaje. This is the caste system. Really, the beginnings of American racism started with our Hispanic, our Mexican people of Spanish descent, right? We're responsible for that. So that's the source of colorism within the Mexican culture. Because there were more people in New Spain that were black at one time than were Spaniard. And of course there was the indiginaje, there were the indigenous. So there's been this cognitive dissonance that's the source of colorism in the Mexican community, because the truth is we all have a little black in us, baby. That's the truth. And this is where this Mexican podcaster is showing his ignorance, because how can you look at that sea of black people and just looking at them tell which of them are Afro-Latino and which are not? The Afro-Latino diaspora gets forgotten a lot, and that's not okay. So you're in the wrong, Holmes. You can't look at that sea of black people and say, oh, none of these are Mexicans. You don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know. In any given situation, when you have a group of black people, depending on where you're at, you may have like roughly 30% of those black people are going to be Afro-Latino, chingado way. So to say there's no Mexican representation, you're saying that black people aren't Mexicans. Now, there was a time, how can all those be true? The first cowboys were indigenous, the first were Spaniards, the first were black, because the Underground Railroad didn't just run north, it ran south as well. So those self-emancipated people from the African diaspora, the slaves who had freed themselves, would run south to Mexico. And yes, they were black, but then when they got there and made a home of it, they were also Mexicans. Because there are black Mexicans. Go to the bathroom. I'm going to get the chancla. Meet me in the bathroom. You know what's coming. With the ear. Ay, come here, cabron. Shut up. Learn your history. 2. Is there a 2? I think I made my point. I don't think there needs to be a 2. He's already getting the chancla. There was a 2. I just got really into that spanking though. Okay, what else? So you're right about there being a little Mexican representation, but not because we were great heroes. We only did the decent thing. We made slavery illegal before the United States did, before the Anglos did. We don't deserve a medal for doing the basic decent fucking thing. Yes? And the rest of it, like, how are you going to make all that about you? I don't co-sign on that. But no, Juneteenth is not about us. We don't deserve a medal for doing the bit. That's like just saying a guy's a good father just because he's there. And that's the way too many Mexican men do shit. Decenter men. So, yeah, no. I'm sorry, you're wrong.